Alright, I am back with another video, and yes, it's the one that quite a few of you have been waiting for. Today we are doing the all-Druid single-class party build. For those of you that don't know, I've been doing a series for a little while inspired by the Dungeon Dudes, where we make full party builds only using a single class and as many different subclasses as we can, because as you know, not every class in this game has more than 3 subclasses, so we have to get a bit creative, and Druid is one of them. Now, people have been voting for Druids since like the very first video in this series, because again, if you want to vote on the next class I do in this series, drop a comment down below, and the most upvoted collection of comments for the same thing will win. And I'm pretty sure Druids got like 100 and something. They definitely won this time, so no longer prolonging the inevitable, we are here. So, looking at all Druids, what have I got to work with? Well, Druids have quite a few strengths that actually play really nicely into kind of this little challenge here. First of all, they're good at a lot of things. We've got Druids that are good at martial fighting, we've got Druids that are good at spell casting damage, we've got Druids that are great at battlefield control, we've got Druids that are great at healing, we've got Druids that can do everything. So actually making a strong and balanced party using all of the different subclasses is not really that hard to do. So the question was, how am I going to do it interestingly? And it got me thinking, right? So looking at Circle the Lands Druid in particular, we've got, well, a bunch of different domains, different areas to pull spells from. I took a little bit of inspiration from that, but not quite wholeheartedly copying it. For example, a lot of the domains come from just the land, so you've got desert, grassland, forest, etc. I kind of pulled all of those into one and gave them to one class. Then I had a look at some of the other kind of big parts of the material plane to pull inspiration from. So the sea, so we've got a Druid of the sea, we've got the Earth Druid, as I just said, we've got a Druid of the sky, which is the one standing in front there, which I think you guys are going to quite enjoy, and we've also got a Druid of the Underdark, the kind of subterranean type, which is there on the right. So each of these Druids are going to be kind of classed as one of the major domains of the material plane. So Earth, Land, Sea... No, yes, Earth and Land. I said that twice. Earth, Sea, Sky, and the Underdark, which I thought was a really interesting theming. And I feel like these builds do play to some strengths, and they do actually have quite a lot of synergy with each other. Of course, Druids also have the unique advantage of just being able to summon a lot of stuff. And while I've tried not to have like every Druid just be about summoning, you can just go full on Nature's Army here if you want and just absolutely overwhelm foes, but I kind of let each build have its own kind of summon that makes sense for it, as well as kind of just focusing on different aspects. Like I say, we're going to have a couple of martial fighters, we're going to have a couple of casters, we're going to have one that's focused on battlefield control specifically. We got a lot to work with here. So without further ado, let's get started with, we'll just go in the order that I have here, the Druid of the Underdark, which of course is going to be a Spores Druid. Let me just make sure I got the camera on the right side. There. Oh, come on, camera, work for me. There we go. So for this build, and for the record, since this is a full party build and these videos take longer anyway, I won't be going in depth about early game equipment options, but all of the equipment that I would suggest that can be kind of mixed and matched among all of these builds, because they're of course all using the same class, they can be found in the description below. But actually a lot of these builds do use earlier game equipment, with the exception for most of them being the Armour, which is mostly late game, but actually a lot of these builds come online fairly quickly as far as equipment is concerned, and because of we got a single class kind of thing going here, the progression is going to feel very natural at all levels. So nothing to worry about here. This is all pretty simple, so let's get into it. First up, we've got our Spores Druid, our Druid of the Underdark. This one is more melee focused. I decided to build this one with 20 dex and 16 constitution just to be a bit more of a frontline fighter, since we're mainly focused on using Symbiotic Entity to do melee damage here. Obviously that does leave our wisdom in a bit of a lurch, which is obviously odd for a Druid, but we do have ways of patching that up, as well as if you wanted to maybe swap out dexterity for wisdom, we'll have a way of keeping this a martial fighter that I'll get to in a minute. But of course, with Spores Druid, its whole thing is being able to use Symbiotic Entity to give temporary HP and additional necrotic damage on your attacks, as well as giving you access to a powered-up version of Halo with Spores that allows you to use a reaction. And of course, I've gone with dual wielding here to basically get extra attack without actually having extra attack. It just uses our bonus action instead of instead of not. So we will be able to get 2 attacks per turn, as well as Halo with Spores, so 3 attacks, which is pretty good overall. And as such, because we need light weapons, since I've not taken the dual wielder feat with this build, I've gone with the scimitars, which kind of makes sense to me. This kind of can work as a Jaheira build as well, and I've gone for some pretty typical options. We've got the Justicious Scimitar here, which is just a powerful, just overall good scimitar that you can pick up in X2. It comes with a +2 enchantment. If you attack with advantage, you have a chance of blinding your target, as well as it does a bit of extra, well, all that extra damage is coming from our equipment, but we also do get a unique shadow-soaked blow attack, which is going to do a bit of extra slashing and a bit of extra psychic. It's basically just a solid scimitar. You can kind of sort this out for whatever you like. If you want to throw a different light weapon in there, entirely up to you. We also do have the Thorn Blade, which makes sense for what we're going for here. While concentrating, which we will be doing pretty much all the time, our attacks deal an additional 1d4 poison damage, and we get access to Ensnaring Strike. This is definitely a Drow Druid weapon. It deals poison damage, and it has some druidic effects, as well as that extra poison damage just coming in really, really clutch for some nice damage here. Again, this build likes to stack up its damage. We don't have 2 weapon fighting here because obviously Druid does not get a fighting style, so this is going to be mainly in our offhand, because it is going to be our lower damage weapon, and we still get the extra poison damage regardless if it's in our main hand or in our offhand. And since our Justicious Scimitar is going to be the more powerful option overall, we do want to kind of have it in the main hand. But of course, if you want to be able to dual wield, you can just use the Gloves of the Balanced Hands to dual wield at max efficacy. It's a shame that we can't get the fighting style here, but if you were realistically playing this build and you wanted to play it exactly as I've shown here, maybe take out a level of Druid and pop in a level of Fighter to just fix that issue outright. Start with the level of Fighter for those Constitution saving throw proficiencies, but otherwise, we're pretty good on that front. So yeah, those are the weapons we're going to go for. However, I will say, if you wanted to still get high wisdom on this build, you could take these 2 out, put your dexterity maybe down to 14 or 16 and kind of jumble these stats around, and put your wisdom up to 20 with two ability score improvements, because this build does have a feat, and instead use Shillelagh with a quarterstaff, but specifically when you get to Act 3, pick up the Staff of Cherished Necromancy. It comes with a built-in 1d4 necrotic damage, which is always nice, in addition to whatever bonuses I'll be showing off in a minute, as well as whenever the wielder kills a creature with a spell, you can absorb their energy to gain Life Essence until your next long rest. Life Essence allows you to cast necromancy spells without a spell slot, and we do get a couple of necromancy spells, namely Blight, which is going to be our big, massive damage ranged attack. So yeah, you do have options there. If you want to go for the staff variant, this would look perfectly fine. This would work great. If you want to make all of these guys wisdom-based, but since I already have a couple of other wisdom-based druids here, I decided to do something a bit different for this one. And besides, with our headgear, as a potential option I'll get to in a minute, we can patch it up even with these stats. So we're looking pretty good. For starters, let's get into the Horns of the Berserker for our headpiece on this build. We gain a +2 bonus to attack rolls when attacking creatures that have already taken damage. Perfectly fine. We also deal an extra 2 necrotic damage with our melee attacks, as long as we do not have our full health, but if we don't deal any damage that turn, we take a bit of necrotic damage. This just felt extremely on theme for the build, adding more necrotic damage, almost like the spores kind of need to be constantly passed on or they start to overtake our body. So I felt like that one was pretty cool. But of course, you could swap this out, and this is a decent early game option as well, for the Helmet of Arcane Acuity. The Helmet of Arcane Acuity allows you to, whenever you deal weapon damage, you gain Arcane Acuity for 2 turns. And for every turn of Arcane Acuity that you have, you get a bonus to spell attack rolls and difficulty class, and I believe this can stack up to +10. So technically, after dealing quite a few weapon attacks, which you would be able to do thanks to our dual wielding thing that we got going on here, you would actually be able to stack this up pretty quickly and basically still have your spells cast as if you put all those points into wisdom anyway. So it's actually very, very strong and works out nicely for this build if you maybe want to use that instead of the Horns of the Berserker. I feel like the Horns of the Berserker are a bit more on theme lore-wise, but this would absolutely patch up any low wisdom issues if you really want to focus on being able to cast things like Blight more effectively. But even with our lower wisdom score, other things like Cloud Kill also work quite well. As for our kind of spell list here, I've gone for some more general utility options that allow us to kind of augment our melee fighting, as well as just concentration spells that don't really need a spell save DC for us to just slap on and let them go. So of course we've got Enhanced Sleep on Longstrider to give us a bit more maneuverability. We've got things like we get Detect Thoughts anyway, so that's a nice thing to have for dialogue, because I've kind of given this build a bit more charisma. We've got blindness as well, which does not have a saving throw, which is oh no, it does have a saving throw, sorry. It doesn't use our concentration, right, that's right. It doesn't use our concentration. It does have a con save, but again, Arcane Acuity, Wisdom build can pump that up. Pass Without Trace to allow us all to be stealthy. Heat Metal can also work as well, again, if you kind of build up that Arcane Acuity. We get Animate Dead, and Fungal Infestation, so the thing is we're going to be summoning a lot of undead allies, which is really, really nice. Gaseous Form can also work well for us. Freedom of Movement is going to allow us to kind of avoid difficult terrain, which is always great. Blight, of course. Insect Plague, another kind of on-theme thing, and Contagion as well. We got a lot of good spells here that kind of just work for us. So yeah, the main thing here for us mostly is just attack, attack, attack. Be a frontline fighter. I've also slapped on the Tough feat to give us way more hit points, which is why this build has 123. Stacked on with the temporary HP got gained from Symbiotic Entity, 48. We're going to be a very tanky frontline fighter for the party without needing to wild shape. But even if we don't wild shape, as a primary thing, it is still an option to us. We gain all of the kind of main wild shapes for Druid. So overall, you're going to have a pretty solid spell selection here, but let's get back to the equipment. First up, we have the Flesh Melter Cloak for our cloak, which just means that whenever we take melee damage, the creature that dealt it to us takes a bit of acid damage. So not only have I got necrotic, I've also kind of focused on poison and acid as well, because of course we've got Cloud Kill and Poison Spray on here. So it's just a kind of blend of all the green damage types, with, let's say. I've explored this concept before with my old Poisoner build, which I would seriously suggest you go watch if you kind of like this general idea. I do think I've done it a bit better in that video, because I didn't have as many restrictions. But otherwise, I do think this is still quite a solid setup for what we're trying to go for here. Having max levels in Druid when you're playing a Spores Druid is always nice, because you get that maximum temporary HP. Next up, obvious choice here, the Armour of the Spore Keeper. The Armour of the Spore Keeper is going to give us a +1 bonus to spell save DC, which again helps with that lower wisdom. And when dealing necrotic damage, we always deal an additional 1. So that's any source of necrotic damage. So we're going to have a couple of extra like necrotic damage bonuses on top here, and they'll all get that extra 1 bit of damage. So it does actually stack up quite nicely. As well as, while we have Symbiotic Entity up, we're going to gain access to some new, unique Spore abilities. I'll go over those quickly now. First up, we have Bibberbang Spores, which deal poison damage, again, on theme for us, and also create clouds of Noxious Fumes. Noxious Fumes makes it so creatures have to succeed a Constitution saving throw or take an additional 2d4 poison damage. So it's just a lot of extra damage, which is nice. We also have Spreading Spores, which deal necrotic damage, and it also, yeah, so basically it just does extra damage over time, which is fine. We have Tiamusk Spores, which can befuddle creatures, which basically just gives them the confused condition, as well as dealing a bit of poison damage, as well as Haste Spores that can haste anyone who stands within them. Basically just a ton of extra on-theme buffs that work nicely for this build. Again, this is an Act 3 option though. I do have some possible early game options listed in the description for you to check out. Next up, the Dark Justiciar Gauntlets. These are just going to give us an additional 1d4 necrotic damage on all of our attacks. Again, kind of an on-theme choice, just getting as much necrotic damage as we can, because it's not very often resisted unless you're up against undead, so there will be a lot of opportunities to make the most of this. Maybe it's going to be a bit of an issue if you're playing through Act 2, in which case some other glove options may strike your fancy, but if you just really want to stack up on the theme of this build, then there you go. And finally, the Disintegrating Nightwalkers. This is a drow piece of armor, so it makes sense to pick these up for our drow character, giving us Misty Step as well, which is going to be great, allowing us to go straight into melee whenever we want to, once per short rest, but also because we have a lot of battlefield control going on this build, we have various different surfaces that are going to be tricky for our foes. We don't really want them messing us up, so making this so we cannot be enwebbed, entangled, or ensnared, and cannot slip or grease or ice is going to be extremely valuable for us, because again, we're a frontline fighter, we're going to be wanting to get up close and personal with our enemies. So we definitely want to make sure that we're not going to be tripping up on the terrains that our allies have set up. So definitely wanted to keep those around. Next up, I wanted to get some more poison damage, so I've gone for the Broodmother's Revenge and Ring of Regeneration combo. Ring of Regeneration is going to heal us every single turn, but of course we are going to have healing party members as well, who can heal us quite frequently, so we'll be able to keep this buff up even without the ring, realistically. But I also kind of like the idea of this symbiotic entity kind of thing, this symbiotic relationship we have with the spores actually healing our body, so I felt like it actually felt quite on theme as well. As well as Broodmother's Revenge, whenever we get healed, our weapons deal an additional 1d6 poison damage. And And finally, the Caustic Band, making our weapon attacks deal an extra 2 acid damage. So we're going to be dealing necrotic, acid, and poison with all of our attacks, stacking up quite a bit, which I think is really, really nice. Again, kind of mix and match for kind of armor options I have here to get the build that works best for you. But overall, this particular build is going to be very, very effective at frontline fighting, and then once you take down an enemy, raise them back up as your animated undead companion to just fill the board with even more summons, because holy crap, this build has a lot of summons. This whole party has a lot of summons, I should say. But yeah, overall, that is our first build. Just a tough, martial, dual-wielding fighter that you can mess around with and change things up with as you like. But the main focus here is just going to be being the frontline fighter, which makes it a tough feat. Really, really important for this build. And quickly, I'll just go over this. I have coloured... I don't think I coloured the main armor piece, because I kind of like the colouring it already had. But the other stuff kind of got coloured in, I believe, yeah, Harlequin Black and White and Indigo to kind of... Yeah, I think I coloured the cloak in Indigo, and I coloured the gloves in Harlequin Black and White. So yeah, there you go. That is our Underdark Druid. So let's move on to the Earth Druid, which is, of course, our Moon Druid. Not Circle of the Land, believe it or not. I've got plans for that. Basically, this build's whole thing is also being a frontline martial fighter. We're going to be using Shillelagh with our Quarterstaff, which I forgot to put on the build. I'm pretty sure it was the gold Wormling Staff that deals extra fire damage and such like that and lets you cast Firebolt. So look in the description for that. I forgot to put it on this build. I'm a bloody idiot. But anyways, we have here a Max Wisdom Druid that's going to be using Shillelagh for melee attacks, as well as having decent Dexterity and Constitution, 16 in both, to have a decent pool of HP and decent armor class while wearing light armor, because that's what we have. But of course, our main thing here is Wild Shape. I decided to lit this one up with a couple of healing spells so that we used, because as a Moon Druid we'll be able to heal in Wild Shape, so we can also make it so we can heal our allies. It felt quite on theme, as well as I've picked up a bunch of summoning spells for this one. This is probably going to be one of our main summoners. As you can see here, we've got like the Earth Myrmidon and a few others. I believe we've got the Mud Mephits, because Earth, as well as the Dryad on our side. So we've got a few options here. So I mainly loaded this one up with kind of utility and summons and a bit of healing. We've got things like Spike Growth and Thorn Whip and Wall of Stone, because again, Earth, and Plant Growth as well, because again, Earth. It all made sense in the wash, and we've gone for a pretty typical Moon Druid build here. Nothing too crazy. The main difference here is that I've actually made this build capable of martial fighting outside of Wild Shape, which I felt was quite fun as well. I've also decided to play as a Dwagar for this one. I kind of accidentally made like Dwagar Geralt of Rivia here for some reason. But for this, I'm kind of thinking, because with the Dwagar, you get Dwagar Resilience, which is going to give you advantage on saving throws against illusions or being charmed or paralyzed, which again makes sense for somebody who has an Underdark party member in the party. But I've also wanted this for the Dwagar's Enlarge ability, because from those of you who remember the Wild Titan video, the Dwagar's Enlarge ability, I'm stumbling over my words today, works with Wild Shape. So if you click Enlarge and then Wild Shape after as a bonus action, you're going to be a very big animal, and that's fun. So I decided to go with it. We're also going to get Invisibility as well, which lets you be a little bit trickstery, which is kind of fun. So, you know, you get all the fun stuff there. But yeah, the main thing here is summons, a bit of healing, and just some general utility and battlefield control that you can just slap on and then Wild Shape afterwards. So let's get into the actual equipment. Again, there's supposed to be, I believe it is the gold Wormling Staff here, because it's quite an early game staff that is meant for melee combat, so it works quite nicely, deals a bit of fire damage, and I believe it also lets you cast Firebolt. So, unlike me, remember to put that on your build. And next up, we've got the pretty typical Druid Wild Shape build kind of stuff. We've got the Shape Changer hat, giving us an additional Wild Shape charge, as well as a +1 to our nature. We've got the Armour of Moonbasking, which gives 22 temporary HP to our Wild Shapes, as well as we have a +2 bonus to our Armour class, and we have advantage on saving throws against spells, and that persists into Wild Shape, making us very, very tanky. Overall, pretty solid. Again, early game options in the description. Next up, the Hell Rider's Pride. We've got a bit of healing on this build, so let's take advantage of that. Whenever we heal another creature, it gains resistance against bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, so we can make our whole party a bit more tanky with a casting of something like Mass Cure Wounds, or we can make individual party members a bit more tanky with things like Healing Word. Again, the goal of this build, while it is focused on Wild Shape, isn't necessarily to be in Wild Shape all the time. We have 3 Wild Shape charges per long rest. We definitely want to make sure we're picking and choosing when we Wild Shape. We might want to do a bit of healing for a bit, then Wild Shape. We may want to go straight into the tanking. It's entirely up to you. So you will have to kind of pick and choose when the best time to wild shape is, and that's kind of the point. It makes the build a bit more interesting rather than just click on Owlbear and go, because let's be honest, that's what you're going to do. So I do kind of like having this incentive here to maybe just be a bit of a support before you go in and start bearing it up. I have no idea why I said that. Let's keep going. We're short and stubby, so let's grab the Boots of Speed. This is going to give us the ability to dash as a bonus action, which is always nice for martial fighters, being able to get immediately in range, as well as this basically gives disadvantage on opportunity attacks against us as well, this specific version. So yeah, dash as a bonus action into combat or out of combat and not worry too much. Obviously you won't be able to do that in Wild Shape, unfortunately, but again, get to where you want to be, then Wild Shape. It would have to be on the next turn, because we have Combat Wild Shape, and these both take a bonus action, but you get the point. It's just there to fill a slot. If you can swap this around if you so desire. Next up, 2 more pieces of our typical Wild Shape kit. We've got the Corvid token, which is going to give us Featherfall, great for Owlbear dive bombs. I cannot speak today. It's been a very long day at work. And basically, we also get the ability to polymorph into a Dire Raven, which can be useful. It's not going to use our Wild Shape charge, so it's a nice utility transformation that we get. But the main thing is the Featherfall, so again, Owlbear power bombs. RKO out of nowhere. Does anybody remember that meme? RKO out of nowhere? Man, I'm old. Not that old, but old enough to think that was a while ago. And also we have the Shapeshifter's Boon ring, meaning that while we're shapeshifted or disguised, we gain a plus 1d4 bonus to all checks. Wild Shape counts, so that's a plus 1d4 bonus to all checks while wild shaped. And finally, the Poisoner's Ring, which may seem odd, but since I kind of filled up all the ring slots on the Underdark build, this is a ring that's meant to support the Underdark build. Since you're both going to be in melee combat, you're going to be next to each other quite a bit, so I figured having the Poisoner's Ring here to quickly, before we wild shape, just kind of make up to 3 enemies vulnerable to poison, and then having our, what did they call it? The Underdark Druid cast Cloud Kill after that. That is a massive way to start off combat. So I definitely recommend kind of having this at least on one of the characters to help support. If you want to put this on the Underdark Druid and place it something like maybe the Caustic Band, you absolutely can. But I did think that since I didn't really have a decent ring slot for this, I thought I would pop it here. And I actually think it does give incentive for these builds to work together and feel like they have a bit of synergy. So yeah, overall, not too much to this one as with most Moon Druids. You basically just pick and choose your spells that you want before you wild shape, then you wild shape, and then you just go crazy. So nothing too insane here, just bringing back some old tricks and tips that I've learned over the years with the whole Dwagar Enlarged thing. So let's move on to the next one, which is one of the more interesting ones, the Ocean Druid. So basically, this is a Circle of the Land spellcaster druid that is focused on battlefield control with a little bit of extra healing on top as well. Basically, the whole idea of this build was to kind of get cold-themed spells, so things like Ice Knife, Ice Storm, Cone of Cold, and some other unique spells that we get from Circle of the Land that we wouldn't normally be able to get anywhere else, such as Mirror Image and Misty Step, as well as picking up things like Sleet Storm for battlefield control against casters, big damage attacks with Cone of Cold and Ice Storm, battlefield control by making ice surfaces with things like Create or Destroy Water and Ice Knife. Also, Create or Destroy Water is going to make all of our enemies vulnerable to our cold damage, meaning that we're going to be able to do a lot of damage. We also do have things like Conjure Elemental as well, because again, we can create a Water Elemental, which just made sense for a build like this, and as well as Hold Person as well, because we can literally freeze someone in place, which is a great piece of battlefield control. I did also pick up Contagion as well, I believe, from Circle of the Land, because this, I mean, you literally just make them sick from being in the cold. I mean, it felt like it made sense to me at least. And we just have the more generic healing options like Lesser and Greater Restoration, Mass Cure Wounds. We even got Heal here as well, which is quite nice. And so yeah, this is mainly meant to be a battlefield control build making ice surfaces through our ice spells and equipment. Obviously going for the ocean theming, I've kind of built my Silver Sea Monster Dragonborn here, which comes with the Frost Breath feature, which felt appropriate, and I just absolutely love this design. I think I killed it with this one. And yeah, so basically, overall thing here is cold damage, battlefield control, feeling the wrath of like an icy storm type deal. Again, kind of based on maybe like the northern oceans of the material plane. I don't know, Fantasy Antarctica. Anyways, let's move on to the equipment. First up, the Morning Frost. When dealing cold damage, you always deal an additional 1 cold damage, which is nice, as well as the fact that we can use Shillelagh on this and get an additional 1d4 of cold damage on our melee attacks. Not that you'd necessarily want to focus on those with this build, but it is an option. Oh, wait, I just realized something. I forgot to mention the Earth The Earth build has Tavern Brawler as its as its feat, and I put the +1 into Constitution. That's how I made these stats work. Apologies. And in the Ocean build, and the reason I brought that up now is because the Ocean build is the only build here in this party that does not have a feat. While Warcaster would work, I did actually end up using that on the Sky build. So I just put the extra point into Constitution here to give us a bit more HP. So you could technically go into Martial Fighting, as well as just giving us 20 Wisdom as well. And I also put a bit more Intelligence into here. Dexterity, not so much, but you could choose to patch that up with that extra ability score if you want. Yeah, apologies about that. I completely forgot to mention. I'm, again, trying to get this video done in a very short amount of time. So, yeah, as for this, I've kind of gone for 3 of the Arctic domains and a coast domain to get the kind of spells that I mentioned earlier. As well as I've kind of gone for like cold and ice-based equipment for battlefield control. Again, with the Morning Frost, as I'll continue on with, basically whenever we deal cold damage with a spell, we can possibly inflict Chilled. Chilled makes affected entities vulnerable to cold damage, so we have 2 ways of creating vulnerability to cold damage, but it also does make them resistant to fire. Luckily, none of our party members necessarily focus on fire, so that's not a huge deal. So they're going to give us a casting of the Ray of Frost cantrip, which just felt extremely appropriate for this build. Let's move on to the rest of the equipment. The rest of the stuff is pretty standard, so nothing too much, no real surprises here. If you've made a Cryomancer build before, you probably mostly know where I'm going with this, but who knows, there may be a surprise here or there. Not surprising at all, though, the Cold Brim hat. Once per turn, any condition inflicted on the target also applies 2 turns of Encrusted with Frost. Encrusted with Frost gives the entity a disadvantage on dexterity saves, and when there are 2 or more turns remaining, the entity must succeed a Constitution saving throw, or take 1d4 cold damage and become frozen. Frozen means that they are completely incapacitated unless they are dealt bludgeoning, thunder, or force damage. So if you manage to stack it up, it is a pretty powerful condition, but just giving the affected entity disadvantage on dex saves is more than good enough, because when you create your ice surfaces, they need to make dex saves to not fall prone. If they have disadvantage on that, you have amazing battlefield control, so I would wear this regardless. Next up, a piece of equipment I don't think I've ever showcased on the channel before, but it felt appropriate, so I wanted to bring it up here. We've got the Wave Mother's Cloak. During combat, once per turn, the cloak grants water layer protection until the wearer takes damage. Water layer protection means that you are prevented from burning, you are resistant to fire damage, but you are vulnerable to lightning and cold damage. I thought it made sense for this kind of ocean druid to basically have like a watery aura that protects them from fire, but obviously this does make you vulnerable to lightning and cold damage, so honestly, unless you're going for pure lore and as close to the theme as you can, maybe don't wear this one. It's not the greatest, again, giving you 2 vulnerabilities in exchange for a resistance to a very common damage type, don't get me wrong, as well as an immunity to a status condition. I don't know if the trade-off is worth it, so just be careful if you wear this one. Next up, the Armour of Landfall. You gain a +1 bonus to your spell save DC. Great. And whenever you start a turn on a plant growth surface or vine surface, you regain 1d4 hit points. Again, not really in the theme of this build. It does give us plant growth for free anyway, so if we really wanted to cast this, we absolutely could. The main thing that we're going to be getting from this, though, is advantage on Constitution saving throws. With our 18 in Constitution and advantage on con saves, we don't need Warcaster, meaning that we're going to be able to keep up our concentration options pretty much all the time, no matter what, which is going to allow for great battlefield control. Again, Sleet Storm, great. I believe we also have some pretty decent concentration options in no, Contagion's not concentration. Polymorph is another good one that I just kind of threw on there. There's not too many concentration options except for Haste, which could be very, very good, so you might definitely want to make sure you can concentrate on that. Slap that on our Underdark build, and oh boy, we're off to the races. So yeah, I've also went for things like Fog Cloud as well, because it's kind of like an ocean mist, like a watery mist. So yeah, I kind of like the overall theming of this build, and I do think the Armour of Landfall does help. And I've coloured it in a boreal blue, so it looks a bit more oceany. Next up, Winter's Clutches. Whenever we deal cold damage, we inflict 2 turns of Encrusted with Frost, so again, just stacking that up more and more and more. As well as the Hoarfrost Boots. We already used the Disintegrating Nightwalkers on another build, so if we want to make sure that we're not slipping on our own ice, which again would instantly end our concentration, I've gone for the Hoarfrost Boots, which makes it so we cannot fall prone when traversing icy terrain. Overall, it is basically just a worse version of the Disintegrating Nightwalkers that I don't use on this channel because of that fact. So I think this is a first for the channel, so yeah. In any other situation, don't use these, use the Disintegrating Nightwalkers instead, but because I have limited equipment options, there it is. This is called a challenge series for a reason. Next up, and this is kind of a fun one, the Strange Tendril Amulet, giving you Evard's Black Tentacles. Tentacles sprout from the ground, turning the area into difficult terrain, attacking and smothering enemies. Smothering means that they take bludgeoning damage. Now, I know Kraken Week was last week, but I thought, hey, maybe this Ocean Druid can summon the powers of a Kraken Warlock style. So yeah, I thought Evard's Black Tentacles on this build, even if it's only once per long rest, was kind of fun, and it's a fun, unique battlefield control option that I don't normally pick. So I thought, hey, let's put it on this build and just flavor it like a Kraken-y type thing, because that's kind of fun. Next up, another obvious pick for a build like this is the Snowburst Ring. Whenever the wearer deals cold damage, we also create a 4.5 meter circle of ice around the target. So even if we're just using something as basic as Ray of Frost, we don't have any water surfaces down or anything like that, we're still going to be able to create those icy surfaces for even more battlefield control. Because again, if an enemy tries to move out away from that spot now, they could fall prone and end their turn. So pretty damn good. And I've also thrown the Crypt Lord Ring on here. Again, this would technically make more sense on the Underdark build, but again, these builds are meant to support each other. So I thought I'd put the Crypt Lord Ring on this build, since again, not really got another necessary ring, and then just have the Create Undead will just say it's from the Underdark build. So we have even more summoning options, and Create Undead is really good, giving us that mummy transformation, mummy spell, Conjure Mummy spell, yeah, which just creates a mummy, which is very, very powerful. And like I said, Armour is dyed in Boreal Blue. So yeah, that's this build. Again, your pretty standard Cryomancer battlefield control style thing, but you also have the option of things like Wild Shape, a couple of extra unique spells on top of it, and just a lot of battlefield control that works nice for this party, as well as the extra summoning too, with a few fun little extra things thrown in there. Nothing too crazy overall, I just quite like this build. And finally, the build that most of you were probably the most interested in, we've got the Druid of the Sky. Ironically, again, another Circle of the Land build, but I promise there's good reason here. I made this build a Tiefling just for no other reason than I like Tieflings, and yeah. And that also comes with fire resistance, which felt kind of nice, so I decided to throw that on here just for kind of a nice visual aesthetic. But the main thing about this build is, well, air and lightning, because again, we kind of have a druid that's focused on ice. Let's get a druid that's focused on lightning, because that is another kind of unsung aspect of druids, as they're actually quite good at lightning stuff, including Circle of the Land being able to get lightning bolts. So this one is kind of the mountain sky domain druid. I've decided to kind of do a focus on lightning charges, as I usually like to do with my lightning builds, and I've just noticed that Halsin is sat in his underwear over there. Just gonna, yep. Pretend that never happened. Anyways, so yeah, I've basically just gone for some pretty standard lightning-based equipment here with a bit of thunder as well, so you're going to get a pretty powerful build out of this regardless. It's also the only druid here that uses a shield, because I thought this one could also be a bit more combat-orientated, but I just wanted this one to have kind of higher AC. But actually, any of these builds can use shields, so feel free to pop one on any of them if you don't like the lower armor class there. I usually don't put shields on builds for aesthetic reasons, but you can actually do that with any of these, because druids get shield proficiency. But yeah, the focus here is kind of on thunder and lightning. Of course, we're going to get things like Thunder Wave, Create a Destroy Water again, which in addition to making our enemies vulnerable to cold damage, it can also make our enemies vulnerable to lightning damage. So that's another bit of synergy between the two builds there, where they're kind of able to give each other vulnerability to each other's elements as well as their own. I've also gone for some kind of trickstery spells. We've got Moonbeam, because that comes down from the sky. We've got Invisibility and Greater Invisibility to kind of be like using like the shifting air to like hide ourselves. I mean, no, it doesn't make any sense, but hey, I felt it felt pretty cool. We managed to get Flight and Lightning Bolt, which feels great for a build like this. We've also managed to obviously grab Cool Lightning, Gust of Wind, Daylight, because again, the sky, daylight makes sense. Freedom of movement I also thought made sense on this build, so I picked it up. We can grab an air elemental as well. I've also grabbed planar binding, because I didn't have it on anybody else. And I've also got wind walk, allowing us to basically use gaseous form on the whole party, which again, turning them into clouds, makes sense for a sky druid, as well as sunbeam, because again, the sun is in the sky, in quotations, so we're just going to call down the sun's wrath from above. And also kind of going, I went with Mephistopheles Tiefling here, for no particular reason other than the aesthetic, but it did pick up Mage Hand, which could kind of treat, we could kind of reflavor as to like small bursts of wind pushing things around, as well as it also actually gives us Flame Blade, which is a druid spell, which is kind of nice, although our charisma's not the highest, so it's not going to be great, but hey, it's there. So overall, like I say, a theme of kind of like being able to do a little bit of the stealth stuff, a little bit of, you know, battlefield maneuverability thanks to flight, and like being able to use gust of wind and such like that. Again, if I wasn't restricted to just using a single class here, there would definitely be a level of storm sorcerer in there somewhere to get the flight that way, as well as a few other lightning based abilities, but otherwise I actually think this build is pretty solid. Obviously it's as very effective as most lightning and thunder builds are in this game, and it's just a fun theming that I thought could be interesting to experiment with. So let's get into the equipment. First up, 2 early game options, which is always nice. The spell Sparkler, which is going to allow us to, whenever we deal damage with a spell or cantrip, we gain 2 lightning charges. Lightning charges are going to be the kind of cornerstone of this build, because for those of you that don't know, and if you've been watching this channel, I don't know how you wouldn't know at this point, lightning charges allow you to have a +1 to attack rolls and deal an additional 1 lightning damage with all of your attacks, as well as whenever you gain 5 charges, you consume all of them on your the next time you deal damage. This is with a spell or whatever, and you deal an additional 1d8 lightning damage. And because of the equipment that we have and the spells that we have, we're basically going to have this up all the time. As well as I have thrown the Warcaster feat on here, because Warcaster is going to give us advantage on concentration, which is great, but it's also going to allow us to be able to attack enemies that move within our range as like opportunity attacks with Shocking Grasp, which is a good way to get Shocking Grasp on a Druid. So anybody who comes close to us, we're going to be pretty decent with our 19 AC here, and then if they try to move away from us, we can use an opportunity attack to cast Shocking Grasp on them. So I thought it was kind of a fun roundabout way to get that cantrip, but really you could have slapped Warcaster on the Ocean Druid if you maybe used a different armor piece, and then maybe used Spell Sniper with Shocking Grasp on this one, or something like that. It's entirely up to you. But we also picked up the shield, the Real Sparky Sparkball, which allows us to consume 3 lightning charges to basically give us a lightning aura that every turn will be able to deal a little bit of lightning damage of 1d6 to nearby enemies, and also jolt them, meaning that they take 1d4 lightning damage each turn and cannot take reactions. Unfortunately, this can only be used once per long rest, but it is still a fun ability, and I wanted a shield on this build anyway, so I thought it worked out pretty nicely. Let's get into the equipment. First up, the Hat of Storm Scion's Power. Whenever the wearer deals thunder damage, they gain arcane acuity, so our spells have a better chance to hit. You can replace this with pretty much anything you like, as our thunder options aren't great. I mean, our main thunder option is Thunder Wave. We don't actually get things like Shatter, which is a bit disappointing, but this can still build up arcane acuity if you so choose. And this does also trigger on reverberation ticks, which I'll get to in a minute, so you can actually build up arcane acuity quite quickly. Otherwise, you can change this out for something else, maybe the Mask of Soul Perception or something when you're in Act 3, but this is still a decent early game option. Next up, the Cloak of Protection, because I wanted more AC, because we are using the Jolty Vest, which is a piece of medium armor that limits our dexterity bonus to +2 for our armor class, and only has a 14 at the base, but we take 1 less slashing damage while wearing it, and whenever we take damage while having lightning charges, the attacker must succeed a dex save or become shocked. Shocked means that the enemy has disadvantage on ability checks and saving throws using dex, meaning that they're more likely to slip on the surfaces that our other allies create again, as well as they cannot take reactions. Basically the same as the Shocking Grasp condition. So overall, pretty nice ability that synergizes again with our other party members. Now here we go, we're getting into the stuff that you guys know and love. Let's do it. The Gloves of Belligerent Skies. Whenever we deal thunder, lightning, or radiant damage, we inflict 2 turns of reverberation. Reverberation, you all know what it does. The affected entity has a -1 penalty to physical saving throws, and when the entity has 5 or more turns of reverberation, they take a d4 for a thunder damage and fall prone, or possibly fall prone, I should say. This requires a dex save. Basically, we're going to be dealing so much thunder and lightning damage that this is just going to constantly cycle through. Enemies are going to be falling prone all the time, taking extra damage all the time, and it's going to synergize with some other stuff that I'll be getting into later. It's too good. Reverberation is probably the best status effect in the game. That debuffs enemies. The best one that buffs allies is probably lightning charges, but I can see that being debated. So yeah, Gloves of Belligerent Skies, because of course we are. As well as the Water Sparklers. Whenever the wearer stands in water during combat, it becomes electrified. And if you start your turn on an electrified surface, which these boots create, you gain 3 lightning charges. So we're going to constantly have reverberation ticking, we're going to constantly have lightning charges being ticked up, and electrified surfaces create the electrocuted status effect to people who are not immune to it. The electrocuted status effect deals lightning damage over time, and guess what? That lightning damage comes from us, technically, so it triggers reverberation from the Gloves of Belligerent Skies, which means we're getting even more stacks of that. It's a busted combo, always has been, always will be, unless Larian patches it in September, which I don't know if they'll do. They probably will patch reverberation to not tick from electrocuted and like other, technically, like, I guess they're called damage rider conditions, I'm not sure. But yeah, otherwise, at the moment, this strategy is just absolutely busted. Groups of enemies just stand no chance. Let's get into the accessories. We have the Spine Shudder Amulets. Whenever the wearer deals damage with a ranged spell attack, inflict 2 turns of reverberation on the target. Yeah, just more reverberation. As well as the Sparks Wall, giving us resistance to lightning damage, which just makes sense, as well as the wearer cannot be electrocuted, because again, we're going to create these electrified surfaces. We don't want to be electrocuted ourselves. And finally, bit of a fun one here, kind of playing into that trickstery aspect yet again. We've got the Ring of Blink. Lets us cast Blink, which allows you to, at the end of your turn, you roll a d20. On an 11 or higher, you vanish into the material plane, and while there, you cannot be seen or harmed in this world, and then you can teleport somewhere else on your returning turn. So yeah, basically just another kind of, like, maneuverability spell, another way of kind of avoiding a lot of damage, and it kind of just felt on theme, because you kind of turn into this, like, wisp of air, or like a soul or something, kind of while you're blinked, at least for like a visual representation in this game. So it kind of just looked right for this build, so I felt like it would be a fun spell to grab. And this armor set is coloured in blue dye, which comes with a lot of silver and yellow for some reason, but I thought, hey, it actually looks kind of neat, so I thought I would show it off today. But yeah, that is the builds. Sorry if this one was a little bit rushed and felt a little bit all over the place. I'm a bit busy at the moment, but I still wanted to get this video out for you guys, as well as, you know, with these full party builds, they do tend to drag on quite a while, and while I am happy with this build synergy, I do think this will work really, really well as an all-druid party. It isn't that different from a lot of builds I've posted in the past. Obviously, I've done Thunder builds, I've done Lightning builds, I've done Wild Shape builds, I've done Spores Druid necrotic damage builds. This is just a collection of older builds that I've made that are just slightly less optimized because of multi-classing. The difference here, because of the lack of multi-classing, I should say, but the difference here being is that as a full party, these guys do synergize really well together. You'll see from the combat footage that obviously we have a ton of summons, we have a ton of different ways of making battlefield control. We have electrified water surfaces, we have ice surfaces, we have vine surfaces. We can basically completely lock down the battlefield if we so choose. We have healing to keep us going, we have wild shape for tanking. Like, this party can do anything. Like, out of all of my full party builds, maybe other than the fighter one, this full party build probably has the most chance of beating like some of the game's higher difficulty modes. You're taking advantage of all of the powerful status effects. You're taking advantage of all of the you know, decent items and abilities that come from playing a druid. You've got and again, wild shape is just amazing, and the summoning is excellent. Like, I think overall, you're just going to have a lot to work with these builds. So yeah, I think an all-druid party, if you're trying to play under these restrictions, makes sense. However, if you're not playing with these restrictions and you want to go for multi-classing, and you kind of want the same vibe that I've got here, I would play my Poisoner build. I would play my... I guess for the Ocean and like Sky, you could probably play my... deity build for the Bench Queen. I forget, why am I thinking Umberly? There you go. For my Druid build there, probably want the Wild Titan. And for my air builds, To be honest, this one works. I would say this one works. But I could also see you maybe using my Desert Warrior build, which had like an air theme to it, a bit kind of inspired like Rashid from Street Fighter. There's a couple of things there. Like, you could kind of pick up a few of my different builds if you want. But otherwise, I don't know. It's entirely up to you. Choose kind of whether or not to use these builds or whatever. This was just kind of, again, this is more of like a challenge series, just seeing what I can come up with. And, well, again, I would say it's not like the most creative thing in the world, because I do think attempting to go for these themes was fairly creative. I just think I've been doing this now for so long that when it comes to more standard, restricted builds like these, it's just all stuff I've done before, you know? And I'll be perfectly honest here, like, I've done all this before. I've gone over it. Like, now, I've done this better in other places. But again, this is just meant to be a challenge thing. But, like, I've just done so many different builds now that it's very, very hard for me to come up with stuff that is wholly new. The build that I uploaded this past Monday, which was the Bloodborne-inspired one, which has done amazingly, by the way. It's shooting ahead and being one of my most popular videos since my the Bloody Storm video. Funnily enough, if I put blood in the title of my video, it does well. Don't understand that, you edgy bastards. But, like, no, so, I don't know, I just feel like with builds like that, where it's like, oh yeah, I've just created this multi-stage boss battle inspired by an extremely popular game, and there's going to be more FromSoft-inspired builds coming up. I've been asked to do a few Elden Ring ones, and I'm absolutely going to oblige that. But it's very hard to come up with completely unique concepts now. There's definitely going to be more remastered builds in the future. I do want to remaster some more of my older unique concepts and just update them with the updated game knowledge that I have now to just make them a bit better. Things like the Psionic Warrior remastered, which also did really well, or the Dance from Elistre remastered. I want to kind of take older videos like that and kind of, you know, do some more with them. The Fang of Tiamat remastered also did quite well, and that was definitely an improvement, I believe. So I definitely want to kind of continue to look back on older things and improve them, but again, just coming up with wholly unique concepts is getting trickier as we go. So that's why I'm hoping in September I can learn to use the mod tools quite effectively, because I've got a few ideas there. Obviously, classes and subclasses, if I can make those, I will. Obviously, I won't be able to do Wizards of the Coast stuff, but because of licensing, it seems like that's not going to work. But if I can create my own custom classes and subclasses, I absolutely will, because I've got a few interesting ideas there, and I would love to use my channel as a platform to not just do build showcases, but also do mod showcases as well, where I can do like my build videos, but also kind of explain my thought process behind making certain classes and subclasses. And I will sit down and I will learn this. I will, because I actually do think it would be a really interesting direction for this channel to go if I actually made my own stuff. I probably won't start off with classes and subclasses though. I will probably make I kind of have an idea for like Hobo's like kind of hoard of helpful items or something. Like, it's just kind of a fun name. Where I'll be making basically a massive equipment mod, which gives a bunch of different equipment for things I would have liked to have seen in the game that wouldn't have exactly existed. Because again, in all my time build making, nearly a year at this point, I've just keep thinking of, wow, I really wish we had a piece of equipment that did this, so I'm just going to make them, and then maybe include those in future videos, because again, if it's a mod that's available to everyone, like console or otherwise, then technically all of my builds can feature those pieces of equipment, and as such, and I would be one of those people who like doesn't just slap them all in the tutorial chest. Well, I would obviously have an option for that, but it would also be like they would be like spread at like lore friendly places in the game, so they just feel like a natural piece of equipment. I would probably make like a legendary weapon for each class that doesn't have one, and then I'd probably just have some more unique equipment stashed around here or there, like a katana that does bleed damage, like that inflicts bleeding. Like, come on. Why is that not in the game? Regardless. So when the official mod tools come out and we have console mods unlocked, I will be doing that. So look forward to that. But like I say, making unique builds is starting to get a bit harder. I'm going to continue to try and do so. I've got some interesting concepts. I would love to turn more classes into boss battles like I did with the Bloodborne build. Obviously, like, just kind of coming up with interesting concepts there could be really, really fun. But yeah, no, I'm going to stop rambling now. I don't know why I still am. I think I just kind of wanted to vent a little bit just about, like, how, like, hey, we're getting to the point where this is getting harder to do. I definitely think I could push it till September. but I don't know just yet how many more unique concepts I have remaining with the tools that I have available. But anyways, rant over, rave over. I'm gonna go away now. Again, it's been a long day, but thank you all so much for watching. I will see you all next time.